Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we're going to talk about a problem that is almost unique to the Democratic Party, and it happens to take place this time in the city of Chicago amid a budget crisis where it was revealed that Brandon Johnson blew $80,000 worth of taxpayer funds to renovate an office for his wife, the First Lady of Chicago. For some ungodly reason, the Democratic Party is addicted to the idea that when you vote for somebody to be in power, their spouse, their wife, is somehow the co-person in that position. We've seen this before multiple times, and it's absurd, and it's especially absurd as of right now when Brandon Johnson is trying to force a high-interest loan for the teachers union in order to get them paid at taxpayer expense. Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
And I want to remind you that on Wednesday, October 23rd, in the Lower East Side of Manhattan at 7 p.m., I will be debating a person called Joshua Eagle on the idea, and this is his premise that he's going to argue for, that libertarians should vote for Kamala Harris in this upcoming presidential election. It's going to be fun. Registration link at the top of the description. It is free. Come and see me if you're in the area. We'll have a great time.
Chicago grapples with a massive budget shortfall. NBC5 Investigates has uncovered records showing that the city spent $80,000 renovating a single office to be used by Mayor Johnson's wife, the First Lady of Chicago.
Again, the opening of this news segment is ridiculous and absurd under normal circumstances, when everything is going swimmingly in the budget. But need I remind you that right now, Chicago is currently facing a near billion-dollar budget shortfall. They have been paying for illegal migrants that have come to their city because Brandon Johnson wants to maintain the sanctuary city status. And as of right now, there's currently an ongoing fight of whether or not they are going to borrow a high-interest short-term loan of $300 million in order to pay off Brandon Johnson's buddies in the teachers union. And this scandal has gotten so ridiculous that Brandon Johnson has actually fired all 7 members of the Chicago Board of Education, or at least forced them to resign.
Yeah, Alex and Allison, these renovation or redecorating costs, well, the mayor says won't bankrupt the city, come at a time when Chicago is facing a huge financial hole and weighing all options, including potential layoffs, to make up for this deficit.
So right off the top, you hear from Brandon Johnson that these renovations or redecorating costs, which, just think about that, they might not have actually renovated the office all that much. They might have spent this money on curtains and seats and furniture, which is even more ridiculous, aren't the thing that's going to bankrupt the city of Chicago. But the fact of the matter is, the Chicago budget is bleeding, and it's due to a death by 1,000 cuts, and it's more the principle of the thing rather than whether or not this costs the huge portion of the funds that are missing in the budget. Again, the First Lady is a person married to the person in office. They were not elected, they have no official duties, but for some reason, the Democratic Party has a really difficult time understanding this concept.
Chicago's financial challenges raise questions about why the city spent more than $80,000 renovating this office in the Cultural Center for First Lady Stacey Johnson. Invoices obtained by NBC5 Investigates show the work began in room 306 as early as February and continued through August, with city workers, including painters, carpenters, and electricians, clocking more than 350 hours of time, billing the city for more than $25,000 in labor costs.
Yeah, like I said, it is actually that bad. You have the labor costs of this $85K only accounting for $25,000 worth of work, which was done over the course of 350 hours, but the overwhelming majority of the funds that were being spent were done in terms of carpeting, tiles, and of course, furniture for the office.
Invoices also show more than $11,000 went to a vendor to replace tile and carpeting. Another invoice shows more than $43,000 was spent on furniture alone.
It's furniture for the office for the First Lady of Chicago, who, by the way, is not an official position in the city of Chicago. This is such an absurdity. And again, while most of these problems you can find very many cases on both sides of the political spectrum, spectrum, the fact of the matter is, this is something that is almost exclusive to the Democratic Party. Bill Clinton, with Hillary Clinton appointing her to a healthcare commission, there was all this jokes about how she thought of herself as the co-president, and she quite literally used the fact that she married a guy who was a president who left office with some success to his name as a springboard for her to run for president multiple times. Again, the wife has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, and we don't give a damn who you're married to. But also in my city, the city of New York, Bill de Blasio's wife was put in charge of a program called Thrive New York. Why was she put in charge of this program? Because she had some experience with mental illness, and of course she was married to Mayor Bill de Blasio. And guess what? She ended up blowing over $1 billion in taxpayer money based on the fact that she was running this program, and they not only didn't have receipts, but there was actually no idea or even mechanism to measure the success of this particular program. So $1 billion was wasted by my former mayor. By the way, no criminal accountability for that, because the Democrats just assume that if you're married to a strong woman, then she needs to have some role in your administration, rather than the symbolic role that typically people have in their administrations, whether they be mayoral, gubernatorial, or presidential. And this is the one thing that I'll give credit to Michelle Obama for, because even though there are talks about her suddenly being qualified to be president, again, based on her name, the fact of the matter is she did what was traditional in her role as the first lady, which was pick up a stupid cause that shouldn't be all that controversial. And in her case, it was fat kids need to exercise a little bit more, which ironically is controversial on the left side of the political spectrum at this moment in time. But over and over again, we see this pattern of behavior, and I just want to ask anybody out there in the audience, can you justify $80,000 to renovate a perfectly good office to make it more suitable for the mayor? And by the way, this work started almost immediately after he was sworn in. He might only be the mayor for one term. Are we going to have to deal with every preceding administration needing to redecorate this office? Or maybe, just maybe, she could get a real job somewhere else outside of Chicago government. She could do something else with her life if she wants to work, and not expect to get a paycheck or expect to get all these different perks based on the fact that her husband is the mayor. I know he says that his only job is to be mayor of Chicago and love his beautiful black wife and his beautiful black children.
My full-time and only job is to run this city, to love my black wife and my black children.
But apparently his other job is to give his wife patronage positions and make sure she has all the funds she wants to redecorate her office for no particular reason.
We uncovered these records through a series of public records requests that we filed weeks ago. We told the mayor's office we had questions about this on Tuesday, giving them more than 24 hours to prepare for these questions. I'm wondering if you could help define what is the role of the First Lady in your administration, and how do we justify spending upwards of $80,000 to redecorate an office for her and staff in our current financial situation?
So really quickly, before Brandon Johnson answers that question, I just want to stir up even more controversy and point out that the tiling that they put in front of her office looks like swastika tiling. $80,000 on renovations for her office, and the best that they could do with that ceramic tile budget was something that looks very questionable in terms of its design. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying if you look at it and you notice it, it's kind of hard to unnotice it. But let's let Brandon Johnson answer, and I'm sure his answer is going to be direct, concise, and related to the question, and have no ability for him to just throw out some random stuff in order to deflect from the idea that he's using taxpayer dollars in order to make his wife's office nicer.
So the Cultural Center has always been a location for dignitaries. Every First Lady has had office space, there. Renovations for my office or any other office is standard procedure.
Obviously, Brandon Johnson is very caught off guard by this. He says, look, the Cultural Center, very important, and the First Lady and dignitaries sounds real official, they tend to have offices there, and renovations for my office or any office, they're all a part of the new regime coming in. So really, I'm just gonna need you to shut up with your evil white racism. And one of the things that I find hilarious about this is that Brandon Johnson may have inadvertently opened the door for more Freedom of Information Act requests into what's going on in the city of Chicago, what other offices are being renovated. But the fact of the matter is, you could tell he's incredibly uncomfortable about this. And the reason why is because the man is not a good steward of the tax dollars. Again, when Pedro Martinez, the CEO for Chicago Public Schools, says no, absolutely not, to a high interest loan, and the school board, which by the way, all of them were appointed by Brandon Johnson, agreed due to it being fiscally irresponsible, rather than Brandon Johnson coming up with an alternative or maybe shelving the nearly 10% raise for Chicago teachers at this moment in time until the budget outcome looks better. He decided that he was going to fire all of the board members, replace them with even more devoted puppets so that they could force through this high interest loan.
Is there any concern about optics of spending $4,000 on a desk or $4,000 in club shares at a time when the city is in this sort of budget hole?
Yeah, the purchase of a desk is not going to change the financial structural damage that has been in place for a very long time. So this is why we ask, and I mean this respectfully, we ask far more profound questions than that. We ask, how do we make sure that the structural damage that's been created over the course of decades, that we reroute the rivers, if you will, to make sure that it gets to the places where there's dry land. And that's what we're doing.
Now look, I can't stand Brandon Johnson, and I hope this gives you a little bit of insight into why. So he gets asked a very simple and direct question. What do you think about the optics of you spending $4,000 on a desk and a chair in comparison to the budget shortfall that is going on in the city of Chicago? And rather than answer that question, rather than deflect to anything that's sensible or reasonable, he says, you know what? What about the structural things and structural systemic structures that really have structurally impacted the budget for a long time that I've had nothing to do with? That is a question we don't even think to ask. Obviously, we know you don't think to ask that. It's your wife, therefore she is entitled because you are a Democrat. And you're like, oh, well, we gotta do things like reroute the structural rivers to the dry land so that way they could get the water over there with the dry land. But guess what, Brendan? You're flooding the dry land. You're flooding it with irresponsible spending. You are drowning your taxpayers in debt and trying to say you're going to raise taxes in order to pay for the pumps to get the water out of where it never should have been in the first place. So yes, compared to all the different budget shortfalls that you have, this is not a major deal. Compared to what you're trying to do with this high interest loan and forcing out your school board that wants you to be fiscally responsible, this, again, not a big deal. But the fact of the matter is, it's an attitude, it's a mentality. You are not a good steward of the tax dollars. You think you can live large off the taxpayers, and you feel entitled to do so. And anytime somebody brings it up, you minimize, dismiss, and then, of course, you end up calling people evil white racists for daring to ask a basic, simple question. This is exactly what he did when a reporter asked him whether or not during this crisis it made sense for him to go on a trip to London to attend a Bear game, and he decided that he was going to call her an evil white racist in response.
Mayor, is this a good week to go to London for a Bears game, and also who's going to pay for that trip?
All right. Okay. All right. I'm going to London to attract business to Chicago. Okay? I'm going to London to attract business in Chicago.
But are you going to the game?
Hold on a second. Because you already know the answer to that. But I just want to make sure that you do the people of Chicago service. Because I have to be very honest with you. It's pretty jacked up the way you frame that. Right. That is. It is. It's disrespectful and condescending. Yes, it is. That the black man is going to London for a game. It's disrespectful. It is. And people get away with that too much.
So yeah, I'm completely tired of this nonsense. If your wife wants to do stuff, do public events or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But she either does it with the money that you earn from being in office, her own money in her own job, or on her own dime. That's how she should be working in terms of in the capacity of the public image of the mayor, not actually working as an employee of the city of Chicago.
Johnson voiced displeasure with our questions, but they were born out of these receipts. receipts, which show an order for this executive chair costing more than $2,200, a desk labeled for the First Lady running more than $4,400, another staffer's desk $4,600, and 2 club chairs costing more than $8,000.
I mean, come on. Do you guys see what they're spending on what items for this particular office? This is not a lot of furniture. $4,000 for a desk, $4,000 for another desk, $8,000 for 2 chairs, those 2 chairs that you sit in opposite of the person when you come and visit their office, $2,400 for a chair for the person that is going to be sitting behind the desk. This is absurd. You're getting 6 pieces of furniture for this much money. That's insane in every possible way. And again, it just goes to show you the utter level of disregard that they have for the taxpayers. Are you going to tell me they didn't have 2 chairs lingering around that they could have moved into the office for the people who are coming in to sit with the First Lady of the city of Chicago? They needed $4,000 chairs. $4,000 chairs is what they needed. Are you kidding me? This is so absurd. And again, I understand that in terms of the budget, we're talking about hundreds of millions into the billions of dollars in the red. But the fact of the matter is, this is the kind of mentality, this non-penny pinching in these particular areas that leads you to blowing out the budget. When you don't care about the taxpayers, when you don't care about wasting taxpayer dollars, it shows up in small petty ways, like with the First Lady, but in other ways in your budget.
The question wasn't necessarily about just the dollar amount, but about the optics of that. We just had a very contentious council meeting, so I'm just wondering if you're concerned about that optics.
So I've been mayor for 17 months, and you have a question about how I feel about optics? Just go back and review the tape. If I were to allow my leadership to be based on someone's opinion of me, it would be a derelict of duty. I never question my position to invest in people. I don't do this for optics. I do this to transform lives.
And then we get the sanctimonious answer where he's like, if you think I let people's opinion of me affect me, then you don't understand. I've been mayor for 17 months. I do this to change people's lives, and I'm never gonna not invest in people. And by invest in people, I mean pay off my biggest donor base, which is the teachers union, and invest in my wife's very expensive furniture. Again, this guy is an absolute scumbag from top to bottom. That they somehow found somebody worse than Lori Lightfoot. They were able to beat Lori Lightfoot in the primary. They had a chance to elect a real solid guy, from what I could tell, in opposition to Brandon Johnson, and narrowly they ended up with this guy. Narrowly they voted for change and ended up getting even worse in the very same departments that they were voting to move away from. This is embarrassing.
Mayor Johnson went on to mention he's focused on the optics of creating summer jobs for thousands of youths, for ensuring social workers and counselors are inside of schools, and investing in the west and south sides of Chicago, talking points he has raised before in addressing our questions.
So I like the fact that the reporter pointed out that Brandon Johnson did the thing that he always does, which is deflect to jobs for young black youths, for the summer youths, and all of that, in order to avoid talking about the topic at hand. But they didn't even bother to play him doing so because it's just more sanctimonious nonsense. But again, if you want a good perspective on whether or not Brandon Johnson is worse than the Lori Lightfoot administration, remember Lori Lightfoot was married to a woman. She was a lesbian mayor, and her person actually did have an office in the cultural center. And guess what? You're not going to be surprised by it.
And while not uncommon for first ladies to have a role or an office in the cultural center, a spokeswoman for the Lori Lightfoot's administration told me that they did not do any major renovations or redecorating to that room during her term.
Yeah, of course. They didn't spend anywhere near that amount on renovating the office, buying new furniture, or any of that nonsense. And the fact of the matter is, it makes perfect sense for them not to do so. This is just another own goal. But the fact is, Brandon Johnson doesn't really care about these own goals because he has the virtue of being a minority in this position, and everything and anything can be deflected to evil white racism. And that's his go-to move, and it's going to remain his go-to move until he's voted out of office. And by the way, post him being voted out of office. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Brandon Johnson's wife stealing from the taxpayer. Till next time.